Nero Wolfe and the Orchid Thief. It was a Wednesday morning in late April, when Theodore Horstman descended from the plant rooms with murder in his eyes. I was at my desk in the office, typing up notes from a case involving a publisher who'd been distributing his competitors' advance copies to book reviewers, solved, billed, and nearly forgotten. The sound of the elevator was familiar enough, but Theodore's footsteps in the hall were not. He moved like a man carrying news of a death in the family. I swiveled in my chair as he appeared in the doorway. Theodore Horstman, orchid nurse extraordinaire, was normally the calmest man in Manhattan. 50-something, thin as a rake, with soil perpetually under his fingernails and an expression of botanical serenity that nothing could disturb. Today, that serenity had shattered. "Archie," he said, and his voice shook. "I need to see Mr. Wolfe, now." I checked my watch. 9:40. Wolfe had been in the plant room since 9, as he was every morning and every afternoon from 4 to 6, without exception. Interrupting him there was considered roughly equivalent to interrupting the Pope during Mass, and Theodore knew it better than anyone. "That urgent?" I asked. "Yes." I picked up the house phone and buzzed the plant rooms. Wolfe's voice came through, annoyed and distracted. "Yes, Theodore needs you in the office. He says it's urgent." A pause. Then, with the tone of a man whose cathedral has been invaded by barbarians, "Very well. 5 minutes." I hung up and gestured Theodore to the red leather chair. He shook his head and stood by the window, staring out at 35th Street. Through the bulletproof glass installed 2 years ago after an incident involving a lunatic with a .38 and a grudge, the morning looked peaceful enough. A milk truck rumbled past. A woman walked a terrier. Caesar, our lead Doberman, lay in the hall archway, his massive black and rust head on his paws, watching Theodore with dark, intelligent eyes. The dog sensed tension. Caesar always did. The elevator hummed. Wolfe emerged and crossed to his desk. A seventh of a ton of genius in yellow pajamas and a brown dressing gown. He lowered himself into the reinforced chair behind his desk, arranged a spray of Cattleya trianae in the vase before him, and looked at Theodore. "Well." Theodore took a breath. "Someone has stolen the Paphiopedilum rothschildianum." Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that precedes an earthquake. Wolfe's eyes, half closed as usual, opened fully. "Repeat that. The rothschildianum. The one from Borneo. The one we've been cultivating for 8 years. It's gone. Taken sometime between yesterday evening and this morning." I'd seen Wolfe angry before when a client lied, when Fritz burned the toast, when a murderer showed no remorse. This was different. His face turned the color of old brick. His fingers, interlaced over his belly, tightened until the knuckles went white. "You are certain?" "Completely." I checked the bench twice. The pot is there empty. The plant was removed carefully. Whoever did this knew how to handle orchids. They didn't damage the roots pulling it out. Security? The greenhouse door was locked when I arrived at 7:30, same as always. No windows broken, no sign of forced entry, but the rothschildianum is gone. Wolfe drew in a long breath through his nose and let it out slowly. When he spoke, his voice was soft and very dangerous. "Archie, inspect the plant rooms. Every inch. Theodore, show him." I stood. Looking for what? Evidence of how a thief penetrated my sanctum and violated my collection. He turned his gaze to Theodore. "You will make a complete inventory. Every plant, every pot, every tool. I want to know if anything else is missing or disturbed." "Yes, sir." "And Theodore, this information does not leave this house. Tell no one. Is that clear?" "Perfectly." We went up together in the elevator. The plant rooms occupied the entire top floor of the brownstone, 10,000 square feet of temperature-controlled paradise, divided into 3 glass-walled chambers, tropical, temperate, and cool. The air hit me first, as it always did. Warm, humid, heavy with the scent of growing things and damp earth. Automatically, Mars and Diana, 2 of our Dobermans, assigned to upper floor patrol, rose from their positions near the stairs and followed us in, noses working. The tropical room blazed with color. Orchids lined the benches in regimented rows, each labeled with Latin precision. Phalaenopsis, Cattleya, Oncidium, Vanda. Thousands of them, some worth a fortune, others valuable only to Wolfe. Theodore led me to the northwest bench, 3rd tier. "Here," he said, pointing, "an empty pot. Red clay, 12 inches across, filled with orchid bark and sphagnum moss. A metal label stuck in the medium read, Paphiopedilum rothschildianum, Borneo origin, acquired 1947. I circled the bench, examining the floor, the adjacent plants, the overhead misting system. Nothing disturbed, no soil scattered, no footprints in the damp patches near the humidifiers. The rothschildianum had been removed as carefully as a surgeon excising a tumor. "What's this one worth?" I asked. Theodore made a pained sound. "In dollars, perhaps 5,000. In rarity, it's one of maybe 30 specimens in American cultivation. Mr. Wolfe bought it from a collector in Singapore who'd gotten it from a native hunter in the Kinabalu highlands. We've been waiting 8 years for it to bloom, and it was about to bloom. Within the month, the spike was forming. That's what makes this so—" He trailed off, unable to finish. I checked the door to the greenhouse. Solid, locked from the inside by a brass deadbolt. The key hung on Theodore's belt. Who else has a key? Just Mr. Wolfe and me. Fritz has a spare in the kitchen safe, but he never comes up here. Windows? Fixed panes, bulletproof glass like the rest of the house. They don't open. I examined them anyway. The glass was intact, the seals undisturbed. Outside, the rooftop offered no easy access. It was flat, gravelled and visible from neighbouring buildings. A climber would have been seen. The elevator requires a key to operate. Mr. Wolfe has one. I have one. You have one. That's all. I stood in the centre of the tropical room, thinking it through. 3 keys, 2 doors, bulletproof windows, and 6 highly trained guard dogs patrolling the brownstone. Someone had walked in, taken a $5,000 orchid, and walked out without leaving a trace. Diana, the smallest and swiftest of the Dobermans, circled the bench where the plant had been, sniffing intently. Her hackles rose slightly. She looked at me and whined, a sound I'd heard only a handful of times, always when something was wrong. "She smells something," Theodore said. "Or someone." I crouched beside her. "What is it, girl?" She sniffed the pot, the bench, the floor, then sat and looked toward the temperate room, ears forward. I followed her gaze. Through the glass wall, rows of orchids stood in perfect order. Nothing moved. But Diana's instincts were better than mine. "Finish your inventory," I told Theodore. "Check every room. I'm going to talk to the rest of the household." Back in the office, Wolfe sat motionless behind his desk, staring at nothing. I'd seen that look before when he was 8 moves deep into a mental chess game, arranging facts into patterns. I sat at my desk and waited. Finally, he stirred. "Report." I told him. The locked door, the intact windows, the careful removal of the plant, Diana's reaction. He listened without interrupting, his eyes closed. "Who knew of the rothschildianum?" he asked when I finished. "Anyone who reads the orchid journals. You wrote about it 2 years ago in the bulletin." I described acquiring a rare Paphiopedilum. I did not specify its location or blooming schedule. Theodore knew. Theodore has been with me for 16 years. He would sooner cut off his hand than harm one of my plants. Agreed. What about visitors? Anyone been up to see the collection recently? Wolfe's eyes opened. 3 weeks ago, I permitted Hector Drummond to view the Cattleya section. He is preparing a monograph on Colombian species and requested access to my Trianaceae hybrids. Drummond, the orchid dealer? Yes. He operates a greenhouse in Westchester and supplies several of the major collections. A knowledgeable man, if somewhat grasping. Grasping enough to steal? I would not have thought so. But a man who knows orchids would recognize the value of a blooming rothschildianum. I made a note. Anyone else? No. I do not make a habit of displaying my collection to strangers. The house phone buzzed. I picked it up. Yes? Fritz's voice, concerned. "Archie, there is a man at the door asking for Mr. Wolfe. He says it is urgent. His name is Dr. Alistair Pembroke." I glanced at Wolfe. He shook his head. The name meant nothing to him. What does he want? He would not say. He is. Fritz paused delicately, quite insistent. "Put the dogs on alert and show him to the front room. I'll be right there." I hung up and looked at Wolfe. "Dr. Alistair Pembroke. Ring any bells?" "No. See what he wants. If it concerns orchids, bring him here. If not, discourage him." I went to the front room, where Fritz had stationed our visitor. Caesar and Mars flanked the doorway, silent and watchful. The man who rose from the couch was tall and thin, mid-50s, with silver hair combed straight back, and the tanned, weathered face of someone who spent time outdoors. He wore a grey suit that had cost money, and a blue tie that matched his eyes. Mr. Goodwin. His voice was educated, Eastern establishment, with a trace of British inflection. Dr. Alistair Pembroke. I apologize for arriving unannounced, but I require Mr. Wolfe's assistance urgently. Regarding a matter of theft and murder. He met my eyes steadily. I am the director of the Botanical Conservatory of New York. 4 days ago, someone stole 3 extremely rare orchids from our collection. This morning, our head grower was found dead in the greenhouse, clutching a 4th orchid, one we did not own. I believe Mr. Wolfe may be in danger of the same thief. I studied him for a moment. He didn't flinch under the scrutiny. Behind him, Caesar's ears were forward but relaxed. The dog had decided Pembroke wasn't a threat. Wait here, I said. Back in the office, I gave Wolfe the message verbatim. His expression didn't change, but I saw his fingers tighten on the chair arms. Bring him in, he said quietly. I fetched Pembroke. He entered the office with the careful appreciation of a man who recognized good furniture and rare books. His eyes went to the Cattleya on Wolfe's desk, and something flickered in his face. Recognition, admiration, perhaps envy. Wolfe gestured to the red leather chair. Dr. Pembroke, sit. You bring news of theft and murder involving orchids. I am listening. Pembroke sat, declined the offer of beer, and leaned forward with his hands on his knees. The Botanical Conservatory, Mr. Wolfe, houses one of the finest orchid collections in North America. We have over 15,000 specimens, including some of the rarest plants in cultivation. 4 days ago, Saturday evening, our night watchman discovered that 3 orchids had been stolen from the private collection wing. Which species? A Phalaenopsis schilleriana from the Philippines, a Cattleya dowiana aurea from Colombia, and a Dendrobium cruentum from New Guinea. Combined value, approximately $12,000. More importantly, they are irreplaceable. Wolfe's eyes glittered. How was entry gained? That remains unclear. Our greenhouses are locked and alarmed after hours. The alarm did not trigger. No windows were broken, no doors forced. Whoever took the plants knew orchids. They were removed with professional care, roots intact. And the murder? Pembroke's jaw tightened. Our head grower, Malcolm Thorne, was a dedicated botanist who'd been with the conservatory for 23 years. This morning at 7 o'clock, our assistant grower found him dead among the Cattleya benches. He'd been poisoned. The medical examiner believes it was administered sometime late last night. In his hand was an orchid we'd never seen before, a Paphiopedilum of extraordinary quality, possibly a rothschildianum. The silence in the office was absolute. Did you bring the plant? Wolfe asked, his voice very soft. The police have it as evidence, but I took photographs. Pembroke reached into his jacket and withdrew a manila envelope. He passed it across the desk. Wolfe opened it and extracted 3 black and white photographs. I moved to look over his shoulder. They showed a dead man lying among orchid benches, his face contorted, his right hand clutching a plant with long, mottled leaves and a distinctive pouch-shaped flower spike. Wolfe stared at the photographs for a long moment. Then he set them down carefully and looked at Pembroke. Why have you come to me? Because Malcolm Thorne kept detailed records of every significant orchid collection in the metropolitan area. In his files, your name appeared repeatedly. He considered your collection among the finest in private hands. If a thief is targeting rare orchids, Mr. Wolfe, you are an obvious next victim. I see. And have you reported this theft to the police? Of course. They are investigating Malcolm's murder. But orchid theft, they have no expertise in that area. I came to you because you understand these plants, their value, and the people who covet them. He paused. I also came because I believe the rothschildianum in that photograph may be yours. Wolfe picked up the photographs again, studying them more closely. Finally, he set them down and looked at me. Archie, call Saul. I reached for the phone. Saul Panzer, the best freelance detective in New York, would drop whatever he was doing for Wolfe. I got him on the second ring. Saul, Archie, can you come to the brownstone immediately? We have a situation. 30 minutes, Saul said, and hung up. Wolfe turned back to Pembroke. Dr. Pembroke, I will investigate this matter. My fee is $1,000 plus expenses. If I recover your stolen orchids, you will pay an additional $5,000. If I identify Malcolm Thorne's murderer, you will pay nothing. That will be a service to justice. Do you accept these terms? Pembroke nodded immediately, without hesitation. Then you will provide Archie with a complete list of the stolen orchids, including photographs and provenance. You will also provide access to Malcolm Thorne's records and permission to interview your staff. Finally, you will say nothing to anyone about this arrangement. Is that clear? Perfectly. Good. Archie will see you out. Return at 6 o'clock this evening with the materials I've requested. I escorted Pembroke to the door. Caesar followed us, his nails clicking on the hardwood. At the threshold, Pembroke paused and looked back toward the office. Mr. Wolfe has a remarkable collection, I understand. The best, I said. I hope it remains intact. He put on his hat. These thefts, Mr. Goodwin, they're not random. Whoever is taking these plants knows exactly what they're doing. They're selecting specimens that are both rare and on the verge of blooming. That requires expert knowledge and inside information. Noted, I said, and closed the door. When I returned to the office, Wolfe was on the phone with Theodore, instructing him to photograph the empty pot where the rothschildianum had been, and to prepare a detailed description of the plant's appearance and growth stage. He hung up and looked at me. Opinions? I sat at my desk. Pembroke's scared. He's also telling the truth, or at least he believes what he's saying. A poisoning murder in a greenhouse is damn specific. And if the orchid clutched by the dead man is yours, we've got a thief who's escalating. Agreed. The question is, why bring the rothschildianum to the conservatory? Why not keep it or sell it immediately? Maybe Thorne caught the thief in the act. Confrontation, violence, the thief drops the plant while fleeing. Possible. But poison is not an impulsive weapon. It requires planning, access, knowledge. The front doorbell rang. Through the bulletproof mirror positioned to show the stoop, I saw Saul Panzer's compact, unremarkable figure. I went to let him in. Saul came into the office and nodded to Wolfe. What do we have? Wolfe told him everything. The stolen rothschildianum, Pembroke's visit, the dead grower, the 3 orchids missing from the conservatory. Saul listened without interrupting, his dark eyes thoughtful. When Wolfe finished, Saul said, "You want me on the conservatory angle?" "Yes. Background on Malcolm Thorne, his associates, his personal finances, background on Dr. Pembroke as well. Confirm his credentials and reputation. I want to know if the conservatory has had previous thefts or security issues. Discreet inquiries only." Understood. Anything else? Yes. Find out who in New York collects rare orchids at the level we're discussing. Not hobbyists, serious collectors with the money and obsession to pursue expensive specimens. I want names, addresses, and reputations. Saul nodded and stood. I'll have preliminary information by this evening. After he left, Wolfe sat in silence, his eyes closed. I knew that look. He was constructing the architecture of the case in his mind, building a framework to hold the facts. Finally, he opened his eyes. "Archie, you will visit Hector Drummond this afternoon. I want to know his whereabouts on Saturday evening and last night. Diplomatic inquiries. We are not accusing him. We are merely curious. Drummond, the orchid dealer, you think he's involved? I think he had access to this house 3 weeks ago, and he knows the value of rare plants. That makes him a person of interest. What about the conservatory connection? When Pembroke returns at 6, we will examine Malcolm Thorne's records. I suspect they will prove illuminating. I checked my watch. Nearly 11. Want me to go see Drummond now? After lunch, Fritz is preparing cellar d'agneau. You will need your strength. The lamb was extraordinary. As always, roasted with garlic and rosemary, served with flageolets and a sorrel sauce that made me forget briefly about murdered botanists and stolen orchids. Wolfe ate in silence, methodical and focused. The 6 dogs had gathered in the dining room as we ate, a routine they'd established over months. Caesar lay near Wolfe's chair, Mars by the door. Apollo watched the windows. Minerva positioned herself in the hallway with a view of both rooms. Diana sat alert near the stairs, and Loyal, the brick-red pit bull, rested near my feet, his scarred head on his paws. After lunch, I took Wolfe's roadster and drove north through Manhattan traffic to Westchester. Drummond's establishment occupied 5 acres in Scarsdale, 3 large greenhouses, a sales building, and a modest house set back among oak trees. A hand-painted sign at the gate read, "Drummond Orchids, by appointment only." I parked and walked to the main greenhouse. The door was unlocked. Inside, the familiar humidity and the scent of growing orchids. A woman in a canvas apron looked up from a potting bench. "Help you? I'm looking for Hector Drummond." "Name's Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe." Her expression changed. Recognition and something else. Wariness. "Mr. Drummond is in greenhouse 2, through that door." I found him among the cattleyas, a short, round man with thinning hair and thick glasses that magnified his eyes to owlish proportions. He wore khaki trousers and a white shirt rolled to the elbows, and his hands were stained with potting soil. "Mr. Goodwin," he came toward me, smiling. "What brings you out here? Is Mr. Wolfe interested in acquiring something new?" "Just a friendly visit." "Got a minute to talk?" Of course, of course." He gestured to a small office area at the greenhouse's far end. A desk, 2 chairs, filing cabinets, and walls covered with photographs of orchids. "Sit, please. Can I offer you coffee?" "No thanks. I'll be direct, Mr. Drummond. There have been some orchid thefts in the city. Rare specimens. Mr. Wolfe asked me to check with people who'd recently visited his collection, just to see if anyone had noticed anything unusual or heard rumors." Drummond's smile faded. "Thefts? What species? I can't get specific, but high-value plants, carefully removed by someone who knows what they're doing." He removed his glasses and cleaned them with a handkerchief, a nervous gesture. "I visited Mr. Wolfe's collection 3 weeks ago. Beautiful plants, absolutely beautiful. But I noticed nothing unusual. The security seemed quite good. Those dogs of his are magnificent." "Where were you last Saturday evening?" The glasses stopped moving. Drummond looked at me, his magnified eyes blinking. "Saturday? I was here working late. I'm preparing for the spring orchid show at Madison Square Garden. It's next month, and I'm still selecting specimens. Anyone with you?" "My assistant Margaret was here until about 7. After that I was alone." "And last night?" "Also here. I often work evenings. The plants don't keep business hours." He put his glasses back on. "Mr. Goodwin, am I under suspicion?" "Not at all. Just routine questions. Did you know Malcolm Thorne at the Botanical Conservatory?" "Malcolm? Of course. Excellent grower. Very knowledgeable. We've traded plants over the years. Why?" "He died last night. Poisoned." Drummond went pale. "Good God. Malcolm? Are you certain?" "The police are investigating." "Did he have enemies you knew of?" "Enemies? Malcolm?" He shook his head slowly. "The man lived for orchids. He was gentle, dedicated, honest. I can't imagine anyone wanting to harm him." I stood. "Thanks for your time, Mr. Drummond. If you hear anything unusual, rumors about rare orchids being offered for sale, collectors behaving strangely, let Mr. Wolfe know. Of course, please give him my regards." Driving back to Manhattan, I considered Drummond's reactions. The nervousness when I asked about Saturday could mean guilt or just natural anxiety at being questioned. The shock at Thorne's death seemed genuine, but good liars can fake shock. I'd reserve judgment. Back at the brownstone, I found Wolfe in the office, with Inspector Kramer of Homicide. Kramer sat in the red leather chair, looking dyspeptic and hostile, his usual state when visiting Wolfe. A cigar smoldered in his hand, and his grey suit looked like he'd slept in it. "Archie," Wolfe said as I entered, "the inspector has been sharing information about Malcolm Thorne's murder." "Sharing?" Kramer's voice was rough. "I'm warning you to stay out of this one, Wolfe. We've got a clean poisoning case, and I don't need you muddying the waters." I sat at my desk. "What kind of poison?" Kramer glared at me, then at Wolfe. "You already know, don't you? Pembroke came here this morning. I had a man watching the conservatory, and he followed him straight to this address. Dr. Pembroke engaged my services," Wolfe said calmly. "He is concerned about the theft of orchids from the conservatory and believes the poisoning is connected. As it happens, I am also investigating an orchid theft from my own collection." Kramer's expression shifted. "Someone stole one of your plants, a Paphiopedilum rothschildianum, taken from my greenhouse sometime yesterday. Dr. Pembroke brought photographs showing that Malcolm Thorne was found clutching what appears to be my plant. Hell." Kramer chewed his cigar. "The lab boys say it was strychnine. Thorne ingested it in coffee. There was a cup on his workbench, half empty. Time of death between 10 p.m. and midnight. The conservatory closes at 6, and Thorne often worked late alone. Who had access?" "That's the problem. The conservatory has 37 employees with keys, plus board members, major donors, and visiting researchers. We're working through the list, but it's a damn long one. And the orchids stolen on Saturday? Kramer shrugged. We're checking dealers and collectors, but orchids aren't like stolen cars. There's no registry, no serial numbers. Unless someone tries to sell them publicly, they could vanish into a private collection and never be seen again. Wolfe leaned back in his chair. Inspector, I propose cooperation. I will investigate the orchid thefts. You will investigate the murder. We will share information relevant to both. Why would I agree to that? Because I know orchids and the people who collect them. You do not. Because someone violated my home and stole my property, giving me personal motivation. And because if you refuse, I will investigate anyway, and you will learn nothing from me until I am ready to reveal it. Kramer stood, jamming his cigar between his teeth. Fine, but if you withhold evidence in a murder case, I'll have you arrested for obstruction. Clear? Perfectly. After Kramer left, I told Wolfe about my visit to Drummond. He listened, fingers interlaced over his belly, eyes half closed. Inconclusive, he said when I finished. Drummond had opportunity but no established motive. We need more information. The doorbell rang. Through the mirror, I saw Dr. Pembroke had returned, carrying a leather briefcase. I let him in and brought him to the office. Caesar and Loyal followed us in, taking up positions near the door, security protocol when visitors arrived. Pembroke set his briefcase on my desk and opened it. Everything you requested, Mr. Wolfe. Photographs of the stolen orchids, their provenance records, and Malcolm's research files on significant collections in the area. I took the materials and spread them on my desk. The photographs showed 3 extraordinary orchids, the Phalaenopsis with rose-pink flowers spotted in maroon, the Cattleya glowing yellow gold, and the Dendrobium with blood-red blooms. The provenance records traced their acquisition, the Phalaenopsis from a Manila dealer in 1949, the Cattleya from a Colombian expedition in 1951, the Dendrobium from a New Guinea trader in 1950. Malcolm Thorne's files were more interesting. Handwritten notes in precise script catalogued every major orchid collection within 100 miles, species counts, notable specimens, acquisition histories, and personal observations about the collectors. Wolfe's collection rated 5 pages, with detailed descriptions of key plants including the rothschildianum. Malcolm was meticulous, Pembroke said quietly. He believed that tracking these collections helped prevent smuggling and encouraged conservation. He shared information with the American Orchid Society and several international organizations. Who had access to these files? Wolfe asked. They were kept in Malcolm's office at the Conservatory. Technically, any staff member could have seen them, but Malcolm was protective of his research. He didn't share it casually. Wolfe turned pages, reading carefully. How many collectors are listed here? 43 in the metropolitan area, but only 8 with collections Malcolm considered truly significant. Their names, Pembroke pulled out a separate sheet. I made you a list. The most serious are Cornelius Blackwood, a railroad magnate in Greenwich, Judith Crane, an heiress in Manhattan, Marcus Winthrop, a retired diplomat in Bronxville, Helen Ashford, a physician in Brooklyn, Robert Finch, an investment banker in Westchester, Peter Leventhal, a textile importer in Queens, Sylvia Drummond, Hector Drummond's sister, who maintains a private collection separate from his business, and of course yourself. I looked up at the name Drummond. Hector's sister collects? Obsessively. Their father was an orchid enthusiast, and both children inherited the passion. Sylvia focuses on species orchids, particularly rare Paphiopedilums. Malcolm considered her collection among the finest for that genus. Wolfe's eyes opened fully. Where does she live? Manhattan, Upper East Side. A penthouse with a custom greenhouse built on the roof. And her relationship with her brother. Pembroke hesitated. Complicated. They're competitive. Both want to have the best collection. There's been tension over the years about acquisitions and breeding rights. But they're family, surely. In matters of obsession, Wolfe said, family bonds often prove fragile. Archie, you will visit Miss Drummond tomorrow morning. Tonight, I need to think. After Pembroke left, I spent 2 hours going through Malcolm Thorne's files, making notes on each major collector. The picture that emerged was of a small, intense world where rare plants commanded fierce loyalty and serious money. These weren't hobbyists growing orchids on windowsills. These were people who traveled to Borneo and Colombia, who bid thousands at auctions, who built climate-controlled greenhouses and hired professional growers. At 6:15, Theodore came down from the plant rooms with his inventory. Every orchid had been checked and accounted for, except the rothschildianum. Nothing else was missing or disturbed. "But Mr. Wolfe," Theodore said, standing before the desk, "I found something strange. On the bench where the rothschildianum sat, there was a single white hair. Not human animal. Quite long, perhaps from a cat. You're certain?" "I've worked with orchids for 30 years. I know what doesn't belong." He held out a small glassine envelope with the hair inside. Wolfe examined it through the transparent envelope. "Could it have come from one of our dogs?" "No, the Dobermans have black and rust coats. Loyal is brick red. This is pure white, very fine texture. A Persian cat possibly, or an Angora." "Interesting. Thank you, Theodore. Please maintain extra vigilance in the plant rooms. Our thief may attempt to return." After dinner, Fritz's coq au vin, which made me forget my troubles for 20 minutes. I found Wolfe in the office, reading Malcolm Thorne's notes on Sylvia Drummond's collection. Saul had called with preliminary background information. Sylvia Drummond, age 48, unmarried, no criminal record, substantial inheritance from her father's orchid import business, known in orchid circles as both brilliant and ruthless. "She's your favorite suspect?" I asked. Wolfe looked up. "I have no favorites yet. I have pieces of a pattern. Someone with expert knowledge is stealing orchids on the verge of blooming. Someone poisoned Malcolm Thorne and left my rothschildianum in his hand. These facts suggest connection, but not yet identity. Could Thorne have been the thief? Possible. But then who killed him, and why? Maybe he was stealing for someone else. A collector hired him to acquire specific plants. He grabbed yours, brought it to the conservatory to photograph or document it, and his employer got nervous about exposure. Wolfe considered this plausible, but it fails to account for the other thefts from the conservatory itself. Why would Thorne steal from his own collection? Cover. Make it look like an outside job. Perhaps. He closed the file. "Tomorrow you will interview Sylvia Drummond and as many of the other major collectors as possible. I want impressions, observations, any indication of unusual behavior or recent acquisitions. Saul is investigating Thorne's finances and personal life. If we are fortunate, a pattern will emerge. And if we're not fortunate, then someone will steal again, and we will catch them in the act." His expression was grim, but I prefer not to use my remaining orchids as bait. I went to bed that night thinking about obsession, the kind that makes a man spend 8 years nursing a plant toward a single bloom, the kind that makes someone kill for a flower. Somewhere in Manhattan, a thief was admiring stolen orchids, and a murderer was sleeping soundly. My job was to find them before they struck again. Outside my window, the city lights glittered against the spring darkness. Down in the office, I knew Wolfe would sit for hours yet, drinking beer and thinking, while Caesar lay at his feet, and the rest of the dogs patrolled their stations. The brownstone felt secure, but we'd already learned that security was an illusion. Someone had breached it once. They could do it again. Thursday morning arrived with rain, the cold, persistent kind that turns New York sidewalks into obstacle courses of puddles and wayward umbrellas. I was at my desk by 8, coffee in hand, reviewing the list of collectors Pembroke had provided. Wolfe was still in his bedroom. He wouldn't descend until 9, wouldn't speak until he'd read the morning papers with his breakfast tray, and wouldn't be genuinely human until after his first session in the plant rooms. The phone rang at 8:30. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's office. "Archie, it's Saul. I've got information on Malcolm Thorne." "Shoot." Clean as they come. Lived alone in a rent-controlled apartment in Jackson Heights. No family except a sister in Oregon. Bank account shows regular salary deposits from the conservatory. Small savings, nothing unusual. No gambling debts, no expensive habits. He spent money on 3 things: rent, groceries, and orchid books. Any visitors to his apartment? The building superintendent says Thorne was quiet, kept to himself. Occasionally had visitors from the conservatory, other growers, researchers, no one suspicious. What about his movements the night he died? Security log at the conservatory shows he entered through the staff door at 6:45 p.m. Alone. No one else entered or left through that door until the assistant grower arrived the next morning at 7. So either someone was already inside waiting, or they had another way in. Right. The conservatory has 3 public entrances and 2 freight doors, all alarmed at night. The alarm company confirms no triggers that evening, which means inside job or someone with alarm codes. That's my read. I'm working on getting a list of who has access codes. Should have it by this afternoon. Good work. Anything else? Yeah. Thorne kept a personal journal. His sister is sending it from Oregon, should arrive tomorrow. Might tell us what he was working on, or if he suspected anything. After Saul hung up, I made notes and waited for Wolfe. At 9 precisely, the elevator hummed. Wolfe emerged and crossed to his desk, moving with the careful deliberation of a man his size. He arranged himself in his chair, glanced at the morning's orchid, a Cattleya labiata, Theodore had brought down, and looked at me. Report. I told him what Saul had found. He listened, then nodded slowly. The journal may prove valuable. What of your plans for today? Visit Sylvia Drummond first, then work through the other collectors. Saul's digging deeper on the conservatory angle. Inspector Kramer called. They're interviewing staff, but no breaks yet. Very well. When you see Miss Drummond, observe her greenhouse carefully. If she has recently acquired rare orchids, she may display them prominently. Collectors are proud of their conquests. You think she's showing off stolen plants? If she is the thief, her obsession will demand it. Orchids are not acquired to hide in closets. They are living art, meant to be seen and admired. I finished my coffee and headed upstairs to change into a suit, appropriate for visiting wealthy collectors. When I came back down, Loyal was waiting at the front door, tail wagging slightly. He'd learned my departure routine and liked to see me off. I scratched his scarred ears. Hold down the fort, boy. His amber eyes met mine with absolute seriousness. That dog had walked 200 miles to find justice for his murdered master. He understood duty. Sylvia Drummond lived on Park Avenue in the 80s, in one of those pre-war buildings where the doormen wear uniforms with more brass than a Navy admiral. I gave my name and was announced. The elevator operator, an elderly man with magnificent posture, took me to the penthouse. The door was opened by a housekeeper in a black uniform. Mr. Goodwin? Miss Drummond is expecting you in the conservatory. She led me through a sprawling apartment, decorated in what I'd call expensive modern. Lots of chrome and glass and abstract art that probably cost more than my yearly salary. French doors at the far end opened onto a rooftop greenhouse that gleamed in the grey morning light. Sylvia Drummond stood among her orchids, wearing tan slacks and a cream silk blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She was tall, angular, with the kind of sharp features that could look either handsome or harsh depending on her expression. At the moment, examining a phalaenopsis with a magnifying glass, she looked utterly focused. Mr. Goodwin. She didn't look up. Forgive me for not greeting you properly, but this plant is about to bloom, and I want to catch the moment when the bud begins to open. Take your time. She made a note in a leather-bound journal, then set down the magnifying glass and turned to face me. Her eyes were grey, intelligent and cold. Your employer sent you to investigate me. How flattering. News travels fast. In the orchid world, everything travels fast. There are perhaps 200 serious collectors in America. We all know each other, watch each other, compete with each other. When someone steals rare orchids and a respected grower dies suspiciously, the community notices. She gestured to a wrought iron table and chairs near a fountain. Sit. Would you like tea? No thanks. We sat. The greenhouse was extraordinary, temperature controlled, with automatic misting systems, carefully arranged benches, and hundreds of orchids in various stages of growth. Through the glass walls, Manhattan spread out in grey towers and rain-slicked streets. Mr. Wolfe believes I'm involved in these thefts, she said flatly. Because my brother had access to his brownstone, because I collect Paphiopedilums, because I'm competitive. Is that accurate? I liked her directness. He's investigating everyone with the knowledge and resources to steal rare orchids. You qualify. Fair enough. Here's what you need to know. I did not steal from Nero Wolfe or the Botanical Conservatory. I did not kill Malcolm Thorne, whom I respected greatly, and I can prove where I was on the relevant dates. I'm listening. Last Saturday evening, I attended a dinner party at the home of Judith Crane. She's on Dr. Pembroke's list, I presume. 20 guests, all respectable. We didn't leave until after midnight. Last night I was here with my housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who can confirm I never left the apartment. Mrs. Chen is on your payroll. She is. But I also received 3 phone calls between 8 and 11 p.m. from orchid dealers in California. They can confirm the times. I was negotiating purchases for my collection. I made notes. What kind of purchases? Her smile was thin. Nothing stolen, if that's what you're implying. I acquire my plants legally through dealers, auctions and private sales. I have documentation for every specimen in this greenhouse. Mind if I look around? Please do. I have nothing to hide. I walked the benches, examining the collection. It was impressive. Species orchids from around the world, each labeled with scientific precision. The Paphiopedilums occupied an entire section. Mottled foliage, distinctive pouch-shaped flowers, labels identifying origins in Borneo, Thailand, China, Vietnam. Valuable plants, carefully maintained. I found no Paphiopedilum rothschildianum, no Phalaenopsis schilleriana, no Cattleya dowiana aurea, no Dendrobium cruentum. Either she didn't have the stolen plants, or she was hiding them. You collect Paphiopedilum specifically, I said, returning to the table. Why? Because they're challenging. Many require cool temperatures and precise care. They're slow-growing. Some take 10 years to bloom from seed. They reward patience and expertise. She paused. And because my father loved them, this collection is his legacy. Your brother collects too? That caused tension? Hector and I have different philosophies. He's commercial. He breeds for sales and shows. I'm focused on species conservation and scientific documentation. We're competitive, yes, but we're not enemies. Would he steal to beat you? No. Hector is many things, but he's honest. He earns his acquisitions. What about the other collectors on Malcolm Thorne's list? Anyone desperate or unethical enough to steal? She considered the question, her fingers drumming on the table. Cornelius Blackwood is obsessed but honorable. Judith Crane has more money than sense but buys legally. Marcus Winthrop is old school, very proper. Helen Ashford is a serious scientist, above reproach. Robert Finch is aggressive in auctions, but operates within the law. Peter Leventhal, she paused. Leventhal is interesting. How so? He's a textile importer who travels extensively to Southeast Asia. He brings back orchids from his trips, some legally documented, others of questionable provenance. The American Orchid Society has raised concerns about his collection practices. Think he'd steal locally. If he'd steal internationally, why not? But Leventhal's focus is on Asian species, not Colombian or Philippine varieties. The plants stolen from the Conservatory don't match his pattern. What about someone outside the major collectors? A dealer, a grower, someone with access but not on the obvious list. There are dozens of possibilities. Commercial growers, greenhouse suppliers, researchers, auction house staff. The orchid world is larger than most people realize. I stood. Thanks for your time, Miss Drummond. If you hear anything useful, contact Mr. Wolfe. I will. And Mr. Goodwin? She rose as well, meeting my eyes. Tell Nero Wolfe that I understand his fury. If someone violated my greenhouse and stole my plants, I'd want blood. But I didn't do this. Find the real thief before they strike again. Back in the rain, I considered Sylvia Drummond. Her alibi for Saturday was solid, if the other guests confirmed it. Last night's alibi depended on a paid housekeeper and phone records that could be checked. She seemed genuinely offended by the suggestion of theft, but good liars often do. I'd reserve judgment until Saul verified the details. I spent the rest of the morning and early afternoon visiting other collectors. Cornelius Blackwood, the railroad magnate, received me in a Greenwich mansion with a greenhouse that rivaled a botanical garden. He was 70, white-haired, imperious, and utterly transparent. He'd been in Boston for a railroad board meeting all last week and had witnesses. His collection was magnificent, but contained none of the stolen plants. Judith Crane, the heiress, lived in a Fifth Avenue penthouse that made Sylvia Drummond's place look modest. She was 50-something, elegant, and vague in the way very wealthy people sometimes are. Yes, she'd hosted a dinner party Saturday. Sylvia Drummond had attended, along with 18 others. No, she didn't know Malcolm Thorne personally, though she'd met him at conservatory events. Her orchid collection was extensive, but managed by a professional grower she'd hired from Brazil. She seemed genuinely puzzled by the thefts and utterly incapable of the planning they required. Marcus Winthrop, the retired diplomat in Bronxville, was gracious and unhelpful. He'd been at a State Department reunion in Washington last week and had 36 witnesses. His collection focused on Central American species and he considered orchid theft barbaric and ungentlemanly. By 3 o'clock, I was wet, tired, and no closer to identifying a thief. I called the brownstone from a drugstore phone booth. Fritz answered. "Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Wolfe asks that you return immediately. There has been another theft." My stomach dropped. "From our greenhouse?" "No, from the conservatory. Dr. Pembroke called 20 minutes ago. 2 more orchids were taken last night." I drove back to Manhattan faster than the rain-slicked streets warranted, parked in front of the brownstone, and found Wolfe in the office with Dr. Pembroke. The conservatory director looked shaken. "Mr. Goodwin," he stood as I entered. "I apologize for the urgency, but this is escalating. Last night someone took a Masdevallia from Peru and a Coelogine cristata from the Himalayas. Both are exceptional specimens. Both were on the verge of blooming." I shook the rain off my hat and sat at my desk. Same method as before, identical. No forced entry, no alarm triggers, plants removed with professional care. Our night watchman swears no one entered through the main doors. What time? Sometime between midnight and 6 a.m., when our day staff arrived. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced. "Dr. Pembroke, I need the truth. Who at the conservatory has access to alarm codes and keys?" Pembroke pulled out a typed list. "I've been compiling this. 37 staff members have keys. 14 have alarm codes, senior growers, department heads, security staff, and myself." "Malcolm Thorne had codes?" "Yes." "Who else among the 14 would have the botanical knowledge to select these specific orchids?" "6 people. The senior growers for each collection wing, tropical, temperate, and cool. The head of research, the curator of rare species, and myself." "Their names?" Pembroke read from the list. Janet Whitmore, tropical grower. Gregory Nash, temperate grower. David Kim, cool climate grower. Dr. Raymond Fletcher, head of research. Angela Torres, rare species curator. And myself. Where were each of these people last night? I've already asked. Fletcher was at a botanical conference in Philadelphia. Left Sunday, returns tomorrow. Torres was home in Queens with her family. The 3 growers all claim to have been home, but I have no independent confirmation. Wolfe looked at me. "Archie, you will interview these 3 growers this evening. Saul will verify Dr. Fletcher's conference attendance and Miss Torres's alibi. Dr. Pembroke, you will provide complete employment records for Whitmore, Nash, and Kim. I want backgrounds, references, any disciplinary issues." "Of course." After Pembroke left, I updated Wolfe on my interviews with the collectors. He listened without comment until I mentioned Peter Leventhal. "The textile importer," he said. "Saul should investigate him. If he imports orchids of questionable provenance, he may have connections to underground markets." "You think he's selling the stolen plants?" "Perhaps. Or he knows who is. In specialized markets, buyers and sellers form networks. If someone is moving rare orchids, Leventhal may hear whispers." The phone rang. Saul, reporting that he'd obtained the conservatory alarm code list and was running backgrounds on everyone with access. He'd also contacted the phone company to verify Sylvia Drummond's claimed calls to California dealers. They'd confirm by tomorrow. By evening, I was back at the conservatory interviewing growers. Janet Whitmore was 40, competent, and irritated by my questions. She'd been home alone watching television, no witnesses. Gregory Nash was 35, nervous and eager to help. He'd been at a movie theater on 42nd Street, but couldn't remember the name of the film. David Kim was 50, calm and precise. He'd been home in Brooklyn with his wife and teenage son, both of whom could confirm it. I reported back to Wolfe over dinner. Fritz's boudin blanc with sauce moutarde, which improved my mood considerably. Wolfe listened, eating steadily, then set down his fork. "Nash is lying about the movie. Whitmore's alibi is unprovable. Kim's family would lie for him if necessary. We need more leverage." "What kind of leverage?" "Physical evidence, linking someone to the crimes, or a confession obtained through pressure." He paused. "Or we catch the thief in the act."
You want to stake out the conservatory?
"No, I want to stake out my greenhouse. The thief has taken from the conservatory twice and from me once. Logic suggests they may return to either location. The conservatory is too large to monitor effectively. My greenhouse is small, controlled, and contains plants worth stealing. You're using your orchids as bait. I am using my orchids to catch a thief and a murderer." His voice was hard. Someone violated my home, Archie. Someone stole 8 years of patient work. I will not tolerate that. I understood. Wolfe could forgive many things, but not this. The orchids were his passion, his art, his sanctuary from a world he found mostly unbearable. The theft was personal, in a way few crimes could be. All right, I said. How do we set the trap? Theodore will identify 3 orchids currently approaching bloom, specimens valuable enough to tempt our thief. He will document their condition photographically. You, Saul, and I will maintain surveillance in shifts, watching the greenhouse from the office via the bulletproof mirrors, positioned to show the roof access. The dogs will patrol as usual, but will be instructed to alert rather than attack. I want the thief alive. When do we start? Tonight. Saul is already on his way. The surveillance began at 10 p.m. Saul arrived carrying coffee and sandwiches Fritz had prepared. The man thought of everything. We established a rotation. Saul from 10 to 2. Me from 2 to 6, Wolfe from 6 until the plant rooms opened at 9. It wasn't perfect, but it gave each of us some sleep and kept eyes on the greenhouse through the night. Wolfe had Theodore select 3 orchids to serve as bait. A Cattleya Warskovici from Colombia, with lavender flowers the size of dinner plates. A Vanda Karula from Thailand with sky blue blooms, and a Paphiopedilum fairianum from Bhutan, with distinctive wine-red stripes. Each was documented, photographed, and positioned prominently on benches visible from the greenhouse entrance. The office was dark, except for a single desk lamp positioned to illuminate notes, but not create glare on the windows. Through the bulletproof mirrors angled to show both the street entrance and the rooftop access, we could monitor approaches to the brownstone. The dogs were alert but calm. Caesar lay in the front hall. Mars patrolled the upper floors. Apollo watched the office hallway. Minerva positioned herself near the elevator. Diana covered the stairs to the roof, and Loyal stayed close to whoever was on watch. Saul took the first shift. I went upstairs to catch a few hours of sleep, but my mind wouldn't settle. Somewhere in New York, a thief was planning their next move. Someone who knew orchids, who understood security, who'd killed once and might kill again. The pieces didn't quite fit yet. Why steal from both the conservatory and private collections? Why leave the rothschildianum with Thorne's body? What connected all these crimes? At 2 a.m., my alarm went off. I dressed, went downstairs, and relieved Saul. He briefed me quickly. No movement, no unusual activity. Dogs calm. He headed home, and I settled into Wolfe's chair with coffee and Thorne's notes on the collectors. The brownstone at night is a living thing. The old building creaks and settles, radiators clank, wind rattles windows. Through the bulletproof glass, the street lay empty except for the occasional taxi passing through. The mirrors showed the rooftop access locked and undisturbed. I sipped coffee and waited. At 4 a.m., Loyal's head came up. His ears swiveled toward the front of the house. I set down my coffee and watched him. The pit bull rose silently and moved to the hall, every muscle tense. Then Caesar appeared, moving with the same silent tension. Both dogs stared at the front door. I crossed to the mirror that showed the stoop. Nothing visible, but the dogs didn't react to nothing. I picked up the house phone and buzzed Wolfe's room. He answered on the first ring. Yes? The dogs are alert. Front door. I don't see anything yet, but they sense something. I'm coming down. 2 minutes later, Wolfe emerged from the elevator in his yellow pajamas and brown robe, moving with surprising speed for a man his size. He joined me at the mirror. There, he whispered, pointing. A shadow moved on the sidewalk, someone approaching from the west, staying close to the building line. They wore dark clothing and moved with purpose. As they reached the brownstone stoop, they paused, looking up at the windows. The bulletproof glass showed us a figure in a black raincoat, hat pulled low, face invisible in shadow. They climbed 3 steps, examining the front door, then descended and moved toward the service entrance at the building's side. They're checking entrances, I whispered. Let them. The house is secure. The figure disappeared around the corner toward the service door. A minute passed. 2. Then they reappeared, walking toward the back alley that ran behind the brownstone. The roof access, Wolfe said. They're looking for another way in. We moved to the mirror, angled toward the rear. The alley was dark, lit only by a single bulb over a neighboring building's back door. The figure appeared, studying the brownstone's rear wall, the fire escape, the drain pipes. Then they looked directly up toward the greenhouse. They know, I said. They know the orchids are up there. Wolfe's jaw tightened. They cannot reach the roof from the alley. The fire escape was removed during the security renovations. As if hearing this, the figure stepped back, surveyed the building once more, then turned and walked away into the darkness. Should I follow them? I asked. No. Let them go. We've learned something valuable. What? They're reconnoitering, planning their approach, which means they intend to return. He looked at me, his eyes hard in the dim light. And when they do, we'll be ready. We waited another hour, but the figure didn't return. At 6, Wolfe took over the watch and sent me to get some sleep. I climbed the stairs to my room, exhausted but wired. Someone had cased the brownstone tonight, looking for vulnerabilities, plotting theft. We'd seen them but not caught them. Next time, if there was a next time, we needed to be faster. I woke at 10 to the smell of Fritz's coffee and went down to find Wolfe at his desk, freshly dressed, working through papers. Inspector Kramer sat in the red leather chair, looking like he'd slept even less than I had. "Morning, Archie," Kramer said without warmth. "Your boss has been telling me about last night's visitor. You get a description?" I poured coffee from the tray Fritz had left. Dark raincoat, hat, medium height. That's all we could see. Man or woman? Couldn't tell. Kramer grunted. The lab analyzed the coffee cup, found near Thorne's body. Strychnine mixed into the coffee. Someone prepared it knowing he'd drink it. They also found traces of the same white animal hair on Thorne's clothes that Theodore found in your greenhouse. I sat at my desk. So the thief has a white cat or dog. Looks that way. We're checking the major collectors for pet ownership. He turned to Wolfe. You still think this is all connected? The conservatory thefts, your theft, Thorne's murder. I'm certain of it, Wolfe said. Someone is systematically acquiring rare orchids, approaching bloom. Malcolm Thorne either discovered the thefts or was involved in them. Either way, he became a liability and was eliminated. Why leave your orchid with his body? To confuse the investigation, to suggest I was involved, or perhaps to send a message. The thief has power over these plants and over those who covet them. Kramer chewed his unlit cigar. I don't like any of this. We've got 5 confirmed thefts now, 1 murder, and a thief who's getting bolder. They hit the conservatory twice in 3 days. They're not afraid of getting caught. The phone rang. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's office. Archie. It's Saul. I've got something. Can I come over? Sure. How soon? 20 minutes. When Saul arrived, he brought a manila folder thick with papers. He sat in the yellow chair and spread documents on my desk. Peter Leventhal, he said without preamble, the textile importer. I checked his business records and travel history. He makes 4 trips annually to Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines. Each time he returns, he files import documents for textiles. But I talked to a customs inspector I know, and Leventhal also brings back orchids, sometimes legally documented, often not. How many orchids? Wolfe asked. Dozens per trip. He sells some to dealers, keeps the best for his personal collection. The American Orchid Society has questioned his collection practices, but he's never been formally charged with smuggling. Where is his collection housed? Queens. He owns a warehouse in Long Island City, officially for textile storage, but the top floor has been converted into a climate-controlled growing area. I haven't seen it personally, but I talked to a delivery driver who brings him supplies. Says it's like a jungle up there. Wolfe leaned back. Have you located Leventhal himself? That's the interesting part. He left for Bangkok 6 days ago, the day after the first conservatory theft. He's scheduled to return next Monday. Convenient timing. Yeah, either he's running from something, or he was already planning the trip, and the thefts happen to coincide. Or, I said, he's not the thief, but he's connected to whoever is. He travels to Southeast Asia. He knows the underground orchid market. He might be moving stolen plants internationally. Wolfe nodded slowly. Saul, I want surveillance on Leventhal's warehouse. Discreet observation, who comes and goes when and what they carry. Can you arrange it? I can watch it myself, or I can bring in Fred Durkin for backup. Both. I want eyes on that location around the clock until Leventhal returns. After Saul left, Kramer stood to go. Keep me informed, Wolfe. If you catch this thief, I want them alive and able to stand trial for Thorne's murder. Agreed. I spent the afternoon checking alibis. The phone company confirmed Sylvia Drummond had received 3 calls from California on the night of Thorne's murder. The times matched her story. Judith Crane's dinner party guests corroborated that Sylvia had been there until after midnight on Saturday. Cornelius Blackwood's railroad meeting attendance was verified by board minutes. One by one, the major collectors were being cleared. At 4 o'clock, Wolfe went up to the plant rooms for his afternoon session with the orchids. I stayed at my desk, working through Malcolm Thorne's journal, which had arrived from Oregon. The dead man's handwriting was small and precise, filling page after page with botanical observations, collection notes, and personal reflections. Most of it was technical: flowering schedules, pollination attempts, cultural requirements for difficult species. But scattered through the entries were more personal notes. Thorne had been lonely, dedicated entirely to his plants, with few friends outside the orchid world. He'd admired certain collectors and despised others. Sylvia Drummond rated high praise for her conservation efforts. Hector Drummond was described as competent but commercial. Peter Leventhal earned a margin note. Questionable ethics, Ray imports, should be investigated. Then, 3 weeks ago, an entry that made me sit up straighter. Received disturbing information today from H.W. claims to have seen P. rothschildianum in private collection where it shouldn't be. Investigating further. If true, this represents serious theft. Must be careful. Don't want to make accusations without proof. H.W. I flipped back through earlier entries. 2 months ago, lunch with Helen Whitfield. Discussed Paphiopedilum breeding programs. I picked up the phone and called the conservatory. Dr. Pembroke answered. Dr. Pembroke, do you know a Helen Whitfield? Orchid person. Apparently knew Malcolm Thorne. Helen Whitfield. Yes, she's a hobbyist grower in New Jersey. Nice woman. Very knowledgeable about Paphiopedilums. Why? Thorne mentioned her in his journal. She told him she'd seen a rothschildium in a collection where it shouldn't be. Any idea what that means? Silence. Then Mr. Goodwin, a Paphiopedilum rothschildianum in the wrong collection, would be extremely significant. There are very few in American cultivation. If someone claimed to have one they shouldn't have, Malcolm would absolutely investigate. Can you get me Helen Whitfield's contact information? I'll call you back. 10 minutes later, I had an address in Fort Lee and a phone number. I called. A woman answered on the third ring. Mrs. Whitfield, my name is Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe, the detective. I'm investigating Malcolm Thorne's death. Her voice went quiet. Malcolm, I still can't believe it. Such a gentle man. Mrs. Whitfield, Thorne mentioned in his journal that you'd told him about seeing a Paphiopedilum rothschildianum in a collection where it shouldn't be. Can you tell me about that? A pause. I'm not sure I should. It was just a suspicion, and I don't want to accuse anyone falsely. Ma'am, someone murdered Malcolm Thorne. If what you told him is connected, it could help us find his killer. Another pause. Longer. Then, all right. But this stays confidential unless it's proven, yes? You have my word. 6 weeks ago, I attended a small orchid society meeting in Manhattan. Afterward, a few of us were invited to see a private collection. The owner was very proud, showed us some exceptional plants. Among them was a Paphiopedilum rothschildianum, beautiful specimen, about to bloom. But something felt wrong. Wrong how? The owner claimed to have acquired it from a dealer in Singapore 3 years ago. But I've been following the rothschildian market carefully. I'm trying to acquire one myself, and I knew of no such sale. These plants attract in the community. When one changes hands, people know. Did you ask the owner about the provenance? Politely. They became defensive, changed the subject. Later, I mentioned it to Malcolm because he kept records of major orchid movements. He said he'd look into it. Mrs. Whitfield, whose collection was this? I really shouldn't say without proof. Ma'am, the police have a murdered botanist and 5 orchid thefts. We need names. She sighed. It was Gregory Nash. He grows for the conservatory, but he maintains a personal collection in his apartment. That's where I saw the rothschildianum. I felt something click into place. Gregory Nash, who'd claimed to have been at a movie the night of the latest thefts but couldn't remember which film. Gregory Nash, who had access codes to the conservatory. Gregory Nash, who worked with orchids every day and would know exactly which plants were approaching bloom. Mrs. Whitfield, would you be willing to testify to this if necessary? If it helps find Malcolm's killer, yes. I thanked her and hung up. Wolfe was still in the plant rooms. I buzzed him on the house phone. Archie, this is important. It had better be. I told him about Thorne's journal entry and Helen Whitfield's account. Silence on the other end. Then, bring me Gregory Nash's employment file from Pembroke's materials. I'll be down in 15 minutes. I found the file and had it ready when Wolfe descended. He read it carefully while I summarized what we knew. Nash had worked at the Conservatory for 8 years, was considered competent but not exceptional, lived alone in an apartment in Astoria, had no criminal record. His salary is modest, Wolfe said, setting down the file. Insufficient to acquire a rothschildianum through legitimate means, yet Helen Whitfield saw one in his collection. So he stole it. But from where? Not from your greenhouse. Thorne saw Nash's plant 6 weeks ago, and yours was taken 2 days ago. There are perhaps 30 rothschildianum specimens in American collections, Wolfe said slowly. If Nash acquired one illegally 6 weeks ago, it came from another collector, someone who may not have reported the theft. Why wouldn't they report it? Pride? Embarrassment? Or perhaps they didn't realize it was gone immediately if they maintain large collections and visit them infrequently. He paused. Call Saul. Have him investigate Nash's apartment, discreetly. I want to know if he currently has orchids there that match our stolen plants. What about bringing Nash in for questioning? What? Not yet. If we confront him prematurely, he may destroy evidence or flee. We need proof first. Wolfe's eyes were cold. But we're close, Archie. I can feel it. The phone rang. Dr. Pembroke, his voice tight with controlled panic. Mr. Wolfe, we've had another theft. Sometime today during public hours, a Paphiopedilum lobii was taken from the display greenhouse. It's a rare species from Borneo, very distinctive. One of our docents noticed it missing during the 4 o'clock tour. Wolfe's expression didn't change, but his knuckles went white on the phone. During public hours, that's a change in pattern. Yes, the thief is getting bolder, or more desperate, or both. We're narrowing the investigation, Doctor. I may have news for you soon. After he hung up, Wolfe sat in silence for a long moment. Then he looked at me. Tonight, we end this. Call Saul and tell him to abandon the warehouse surveillance. I want him here, watching the brownstone. Call Inspector Kramer and ask him to have men available on short notice. And call Theodore. Tell him to select one more orchid as bait. The most valuable plant we have approaching bloom. You think Nash will come here tonight? I think we will force his hand. Archie, you're going to visit Gregory Nash. Tell him you're conducting follow-up interviews on behalf of the police. During the conversation, mention casually that Nero Wolfe has decided to move his most valuable orchids to a secure vault temporarily, all except one exceptional phalaenopsis that's too delicate to move. Describe it in detail. Make it sound irresistible. You want me to bait him into coming here? Precisely. If Nash is our thief, he won't be able to resist one final theft before the collection is secured. And when he comes, we'll be waiting. I found Gregory Nash finishing up in the conservatory's temperate greenhouse at 6 p.m. He looked up as I approached, recognition and wariness crossing his face. Mr. Goodwin, back again? Just some follow-up questions. Got a minute? He set down the spray bottle he'd been using and wiped his hands on his apron. Sure. What do you need? We moved to a bench near the entrance. Through the glass walls, the city was darkening, lights beginning to glow in distant buildings. Nash was thin, with sandy hair and nicotine-stained fingers. His eyes never quite met mine. The police are focusing on people with access codes, I said, pulling out a notebook. Can you walk me through your movements again last night? I already told you. I was home. Right. And the night Malcolm Thorne died, also home. Anyone who can confirm that? No. I live alone. I made a show of writing this down. The thefts are escalating. 5 now, counting today's bulbophyllum. Whoever's doing this knows orchids and has access to multiple locations. That's a small pool of suspects. Nash shifted uncomfortably. I don't know what you want me to say. I didn't steal anything. Of course not. Just being thorough. I closed the notebook. By the way, Mr. Wolfe's moving his collection to a secure vault. Temporary measure until we catch the thief. Nash's head came up. All of it? Well, almost all. There's one phalaenopsis hybrid that's too delicate to move. It's about to bloom, and the stress of relocation might kill it. Wolfe's beside himself, but Theodore convinced him it's safer to leave it in the greenhouse under guard. I leaned back. Beautiful plant, apparently. 15 years of breeding work. Unique coloring. Probably worth 10,000 or more to the right collector. Which phalaenopsis? I don't remember the Latin name. Something with Schillerana in the parentage. Pink and white stripes. Large flowers. I shrugged. Wolfe talks about it like it's his favorite child. Nash licked his lips. When is he moving the collection? Starting tomorrow morning. The vault service arrives at 9. I stood. Anyway, thanks for your time. If you think of anything that might help, give us a call. I left him there and drove back to the brownstone. Wolfe was in the office with Saul and Theodore, who'd brought down a magnificent phalaenopsis, the actual hybrid I'd described to Nash, now positioned on my desk where it could be seen from the office doorway. He took the bait, Wolfe asked. Hook, line, and sinker. He's interested. Good. Theodore, return to the plant rooms and secure every door and window. I want the greenhouse locked tight. Saul, position yourself in the front room with a view of the street. Archie, you'll watch the rear approaches. I'll remain here with the phone. If Nash attempts entry, we alert Inspector Kramer's men and catch him in the act. What about the dogs? I asked. They patrol as usual, but instruct them to alert only. No attack unless I give the command. I want Nash alive. The evening crawled past. Fritz served dinner, veal chops with sage butter. Thank God no duck. And we ate in shifts, always keeping someone on watch. By 9 p.m. we were all in position, Saul in the front room with the lights off, watching through the bulletproof windows. Me in the rear hallway, monitoring the service entrance and alley via the mirror. Wolfe in the office with the phalaenopsis and a telephone. The dogs patrolled silently. Caesar in the front hall. Mars upstairs. Apollo in the office corridor. Minerva near the elevator. Diana on the stairs, loyal at Wolfe's feet. 10 o'clock came and went. 11. The brownstone settled into its nighttime creaks and whispers. Outside, the city hummed with its usual nocturnal energy. Taxis, distant sirens, the occasional shout from late-night pedestrians. At 11:40, Saul's voice came from the front room, low and urgent. Movement. Someone approaching from the west. I moved to the office. Through the mirror, a figure in dark clothing walked slowly along 35th Street, head turning to examine buildings. They stopped in front of the brownstone. Gregory Nash. Even in shadow, the thin build and nervous posture were unmistakable. He stood on the sidewalk for a full minute, studying the brownstone's facade. Then he walked to the service entrance at the side of the building. I moved to the rear hallway mirror. Nash appeared in the narrow passage between buildings, moving carefully, testing the service door. It was locked, Fritz had made certain. Nash examined the lock with a small flashlight, then pulled something from his pocket. Lockpicks. He's trying the service door. I whispered back to the office. Wolfe's voice calm. Let him work. When he's inside, we close the trap. It took Nash 3 minutes to defeat the lock. The service door opened inward, and he slipped inside, closing it behind him. He was in the lower hallway now, near Fritz's kitchen and the basement stairs. Caesar appeared in the main hall, silent as smoke, his massive head low, hackles raised. Mars descended from upstairs. Both dogs moved toward the service hallway, alert but holding position. Nash came up the stairs from the service level, moving carefully, flashlight beam sweeping ahead. He wore gloves and carried a canvas bag. When he reached the main floor, he paused, listening. The dogs were invisible in the shadows. Nash didn't see them. He crossed to the elevator and pressed the call button. Nothing happened. Theodore had shut it down from the plant rooms. Nash cursed under his breath and moved to the stairs. I followed at a distance, staying in darkness. Wolfe had buzzed Saul on the house phone. I heard footsteps as Saul moved to cover the front hall. We had Nash boxed in. On the second floor, Nash paused again. He was sweating now, nervous. The flashlight beam trembled slightly as he swept it across the hallway. Then he found the stairs to the plant rooms and started climbing. Diana materialized at the top of the stairs, a black shadow with copper highlights. She didn't growl, didn't move, just stood there blocking the way. Nash froze. Easy, girl. Good dog. I'm just... Diana's lips pulled back, showing teeth. Not a threat yet, but a warning. Nash retreated 2 steps. Diana followed, silent and implacable. That's when the lights came on. Every light in the brownstone blazed to life simultaneously. Theodore had thrown the master switch from the plant rooms. Nash spun, blinded, raising a hand to shield his eyes. I stepped into view at the bottom of the stairs. Going somewhere, Mr. Nash? He bolted, Not up toward Diana, but back down, pushing past me toward the main floor. I grabbed for him, but he twisted away, surprisingly quick. He hit the main hallway, running, headed for the front door, and ran straight into Caesar. The Doberman stood in the center of the hall, coal-black and rust, 100 pounds of trained muscle. Mars flanked him from the right. Apollo appeared from the office corridor on the left. 3 dogs, perfectly positioned, cutting off every escape route. Nash stopped so fast he nearly fell. The canvas bag slipped from his shoulder and hit the floor with a soft thud. "Don't move." Wolfe's voice came from the office doorway. He stood there in his yellow pajamas and brown robe, a massive figure backlit by the office lamps, with Loyal at his side. "The dogs are trained to disable threats. If you run, they will stop you. If you fight, they will hurt you. Your best option is cooperation." Nash's face had gone grey. His eyes darted between the dogs, looking for an opening that didn't exist. "You can't. This is illegal detention. You broke into my home with intent to commit theft. I am a citizen defending my property. The police are on their way." Wolfe gestured to the office. "Sit down before my patience expires." Nash looked at the dogs one more time, then walked slowly to the office, hands raised. I followed, picked up his canvas bag, and dumped its contents on my desk. Lockpicks, a folding knife, leather gloves, plastic bags sized for orchid transport, and a small brown bottle labeled strychnine sulfate. Wolfe settled into his chair and looked at Nash with cold contempt. "You came prepared to kill." "No, that's... Nash's voice cracked. He sat in the red leather chair, trembling. "You poisoned Malcolm Thorne. You stole orchids from the conservatory where you worked, and from my greenhouse. You murdered a good man to protect your crimes. And tonight you came to steal again, bringing poison in case you encountered resistance." Wolfe leaned forward. "I want to know why." Nash said nothing. "Very well. I'll tell you what happened, and you'll correct any errors." Wolfe's voice was precise, almost gentle. "You've been stealing rare orchids for approximately 2 months. Your first theft was a Paphiopedilum rothschildianum from a private collection. We don't yet know whose, but we will. Helen Whitfield saw it in your apartment 6 weeks ago. That whetted your appetite." Nash's face confirmed it. "You began planning larger thefts. The conservatory where you worked was an obvious target. You had keys, alarm codes, intimate knowledge of the collection. You took the Phalaenopsis schillerana, the Cattleya dowiana aurea, and the Dendrobium cruentum on Saturday night. Easy acquisitions for someone with your access. Then you came here," Wolfe continued. "You'd visited my greenhouse 3 weeks ago under the pretense of consulting with Theodore about Colombian Cattleyas. You saw my collection and coveted it. On Sunday night you returned and stole my Paphiopedilum rothschildianum." But Malcolm Thorne had grown suspicious. Helen Whitfield had told him about the rothschildianum in your apartment. He was investigating. Perhaps he confronted you, or perhaps you simply realized he was closing in. Either way, you decided he had to die. Nash's hands clenched on the chair arms. "You knew his habits. You knew he worked late alone in the greenhouse. You prepared coffee laced with strychnine and brought it to him on some pretext. While he died a horrible death, painful and terrifying, you tried to cover your tracks. You brought my rothschildianum to the conservatory and placed it in his hand, hoping to confuse the investigation and implicate me." "You're insane," Nash whispered. "Am I? We have the white cat hair, found both in my greenhouse and on Thorne's clothing. I assume you own a white cat, Mr. Nash. We can verify that easily. We have Helen Whitfield's testimony about the rothschildianum. We have your lack of alibis for the relevant times. We have your access codes. And now we have you, caught breaking into my home with lockpicks and poison." Sirens approached outside. Inspector Kramer's men responding to Wolfe's call. Nash broke. His face crumpled, and words spilled out. "I wasn't going to kill anyone else. The poison was just insurance, in case. I never meant for Malcolm to die. He was a good man. He taught me everything. But he wouldn't let it go. He kept pushing, asking questions, checking records. I couldn't let him expose me." "Why did you steal the orchids?" Wolfe asked. "Money? No, not money. Beauty. Perfection." Nash's voice took on a fevered quality. "All my life I've worked with orchids, cared for them, nursed them, watched them bloom, but they're never mine. I'm just hired help. The collectors own them, display them, take credit for growing them. I do all the work, and they get all the glory. So you decided to take what you believed you deserved. I earned them. 8 years at the Conservatory, growing the finest specimens in New York. And what do I get? A salary barely above minimum wage and a title that means nothing, while collectors like you sit in your mansions surrounded by plants you hardly look at. Wolfe's expression didn't change. I spend 4 hours daily with my orchids, Mr. Nash. They are my life's passion and my life's work. You understand nothing. The front doorbell rang. Kramer and 2 uniformed officers, shown in by Saul. The inspector took one look at Nash and the contents of my desk and nodded grimly. Gregory Nash, you're under arrest for the murder of Malcolm Thorne and multiple counts of theft. You have the right to remain silent. While Kramer recited the Miranda warning, I watched Nash's face. The fever had left it, replaced by hollow resignation. He'd killed for beauty, stolen for pride, and lost everything. They took him away in handcuffs. Kramer stayed behind, settling into the red leather chair with a sigh. How'd you know it was him? Wolfe explained about Thorne's journal, Helen Whitfield's observation, Nash's access and expertise. Kramer listened, making notes. We'll search his apartment tonight. If we find the stolen orchids, that'll seal it. The strychnine bottle from your desk matches the poison used on Thorne, same manufacturer, same concentration. Combined with his confession and the physical evidence, the DA will have no trouble prosecuting. What about the orchids? I asked. Can they be returned to their owners? If we find them, yeah. Though some of you collectors might have to fight over who owns what. Kramer stood. Good work, Wolfe, even if you did set an illegal trap. I merely protected my property from a known threat. Nash made the choice to enter my home. Right, just like you always do. Kramer headed for the door, then paused. You know what gets me? He killed a man over flowers, over plants. What kind of crazy does that take? The same kind, Wolfe said quietly, that drives a man to spend 15 years breeding a single hybrid, or to pay $5,000 for a Paphiopedilum. The line between passion and madness, Inspector, is often invisible until someone crosses it. After Kramer left, I poured Wolfe a beer and myself a bourbon. We sat in the office while the dogs settled back into their patrol routines. The excitement over. Think Nash will confess to everything? I asked. Yes, he's broken, and the evidence is overwhelming. Wolfe sipped his beer. Saul's men will search Nash's apartment tomorrow and recover the stolen orchids. Dr. Pembroke will identify them. Justice, such as it is, will be served. What about your rothschildian? If it survives in Nash's care, it will be returned. If not, he paused, then I will acquire another and begin again. Orchids, Archie, reward patience. 8 years is a long time. 15 is longer. But the result is worth the wait. I finished my bourbon and stood. I'm going to bed, unless you're expecting more thieves tonight. No more thieves. The brownstone is secure. He looked at the phalaenopsis on my desk, the hybrid he'd used as bait, now safe. Though I think Theodore should return that to the greenhouse. It's been through enough trauma for one evening. I took the orchid upstairs myself, riding the elevator to the plant rooms. Theodore was there, checking on the collection, making certain everything was undisturbed. Got our bait plant back, I said, handing him the phalaenopsis. Thank God, Mr. Wolfe would never forgive me if something happened to this one. 15 years of work. He carried it carefully to its bench and positioned it precisely. Mr. Goodwin, do you think they'll find the rothschildianum? I think so. Nash isn't smart enough to have hidden it well. I hope it's not damaged. That plant. He stopped. Overcome. I know. 8 years. Yes. But more than that, it represented hope, patience rewarded, the promise that if you do everything right, beauty will follow. He adjusted a leaf on the phalaenopsis. That's what orchids teach us, that excellence requires time and cannot be stolen. Walking back downstairs, I thought about that. Nash had tried to steal excellence, to shortcut the years of patient work required to earn these plants. He'd killed for them and lost everything. In the end, the orchids had defeated him, not through any fault of their own, but because he'd misunderstood what they represented. They weren't trophies to be taken. They were responsibilities to be earned. In my room, I could hear the brownstone settling for the night. Below, Wolfe would sit up reading for another hour, a beer at his elbow, the dogs on patrol. The stolen rothschildianum would be recovered tomorrow, or it wouldn't. Life would continue. But tonight at least, the thief had been caught and Malcolm Thorne's murder avenged. It would have to be enough. The phone woke me at 7:30 a.m. I grabbed it, still half asleep. Goodwin residence. Archie. It's Saul. We found them. I sat up. The orchids? All of them. Nash's apartment is a greenhouse. Grow lights, humidity controls, temperature zones. He'd set up a whole cultivation system in his living room and bedroom. The rothschildianum is there, healthy. So are the conservatory plants, and 2 others we didn't even know were missing. Which 2? A cattleya from a collector in Scarsdale reported stolen 3 months ago, and a dendrobium from someone in Connecticut. Nash kept meticulous records. He documented every theft, every growing condition, every change in the plant's development. It's like a confession written in botanical notes. I rubbed my eyes. Kramer there? Yeah, with a forensics team. They're photographing everything before we move the plants. Dr. Pembroke's coming to identify the conservatory specimens and arrange transport. You should tell Mr. Wolfe his rothschildianum will be home by this afternoon. After I hung up, I went downstairs and found Wolfe already in the office, working through the morning papers. I gave him Saul's report. His expression didn't change, but I saw his shoulders relax fractionally. The plant is undamaged. Saul says it's healthy. Nash apparently took good care of his stolen collection. Of course he did. Whatever his faults, he understood orchid culture. Wolfe set down the paper. Call Theodore. Tell him to prepare space in the tropical room and have fresh potting medium ready. When the rothschildianum returns, I want it settled immediately. By noon, the full story had emerged. Gregory Nash, during his 8 years at the conservatory, had stolen 7 rare orchids from various sources. The first theft had been impulsive, a Paphiopedilum from Cornelius Blackwood's collection during a society meeting Nash attended. The plant had been in a back greenhouse, and Nash simply slipped it into his bag. When no immediate consequences followed, he grew bolder. The conservatory thefts were carefully planned. Nash used his access codes to enter after hours, selecting specimens he knew would be valuable and difficult to replace. He chose plants on the verge of blooming because collectors obsess over flowers. They'd notice missing plants more quickly if they'd already bloomed. Wolfe's rothschildianum had been irresistible. Nash had seen it during his visit, recognized its value, and couldn't let it go. He'd climbed the fire escape before it was removed during security renovations, and entered through a maintenance hatch Theodore had left unlocked by mistake. The white cat hair came from Nash's Persian, which had brushed against his jacket. Malcolm Thorne's suspicions had developed gradually. Helen Whitfield's observation about the rothschildianum was the first concrete evidence, but Thorne had noticed other anomalies, Nash asking unusual questions about rare orchids, Nash showing interest in blooming schedules for plants outside his assigned areas, Nash staying late when he had no obvious work to complete. When Thorne confronted him carefully, without accusations, simply asking about the rothschildianum's provenance, Nash panicked. He prepared the poisoned coffee over 2 days, researching strychnine dosages in veterinary texts, acquiring the poison from a conservatory storage area where it was kept for pest control. On the night of the murder, he brought the coffee to Thorne under the pretense of discussing a problem with the cattleya collection. Thorne died in agony, while Nash watched, paralyzed by horror and guilt. But not enough to stop. Nash arranged the body among the orchids, placed the rothschildianum in Thorne's hand, to confuse investigators, and went home to his stolen collection. Inspector Kramer called at 2 p.m. with official confirmation. We've got him cold. Confession. Physical evidence. The stolen plants. Everything. The DA says it's the strongest case he's seen in months. Nash will go away for life. What about the orchids? Wolfe asked. Dr. Pembroke is arranging returns to the original owners. Your rothschildianum is being transported now with special climate controls. Should arrive within the hour. At 3:15, a white van pulled up outside the brownstone. 2 men in conservatory uniforms carefully unloaded a wooden crate and carried it to the front door. I let them in, and we all went up to the plant rooms in the elevator. A tight fit with the crate, but we managed. Theodore waited in the tropical room, a prepared space cleared on the northwest bench. The men set down the crate and carefully opened it. The Paphiopedilum rothschildianum looked perfect. Long, mottled leaves arched gracefully from the pot. The flower spike Theodore had been watching stood tall and strong, the buds swelling, perhaps a week from opening. 8 years of patient cultivation stolen and recovered, Now home. Theodore's hands shook slightly as he lifted the plant from the crate and positioned it on the bench. He adjusted it fractionally, checking the light angle, the air circulation, the proximity to the misters. Finally satisfied, he stepped back. "Welcome home," he said softly. The conservatory men left with the empty crate. I stood with Theodore in the tropical room, looking at the recovered plant. Through the glass walls, Manhattan sprawled in afternoon sunlight, millions of people going about their lives, unaware that a small piece of beauty had been restored to its rightful place. "Mr. Wolfe will want to see it," Theodore said. "He's in the office. I'll tell him it's here." But when I went downstairs, Wolfe was already standing, preparing to go up. He'd been waiting for word, checking his watch, betraying the anxiety he'd never voice aloud. We rode up together in silence. In the tropical room, Wolfe approached the bench slowly, his eyes on the rothschildianum. He stood before it for a long moment, examining the leaves, the roots visible through the clear pot, the developing flower spike. "Undamaged," he said finally. "Nash took good care of it," Theodore offered. Whatever else he was, he understood orchids. Yes, he understood their requirements, but not their meaning. Wolfe touched one leaf gently, a rare gesture. An orchid is not merely a plant to be possessed. It is a responsibility, a commitment, a relationship built over years. Nash wanted the glory without earning it. He wanted the bloom without the patience. And now, he'll spend decades in prison. I said, "Yes. While this plant, which he coveted enough to kill for, will bloom here in its proper home. Justice of a sort." Wolfe turned to Theodore. "Monitor it carefully. Document its progress. And when it blooms, I'll call you immediately. Day or night." "Thank you." We went back down to the office. Wolfe settled behind his desk with evident satisfaction. The case was closed, the stolen plant recovered, the murderer caught. Order had been restored to his world. Dr. Pembroke called at 4 to express gratitude and confirm that all the conservatory's stolen orchids had been recovered and were being returned to their proper locations. The 2 orchids stolen from other collectors were being shipped to Scarsdale and Connecticut. Everyone would get their plants back. "Except Malcolm Thorne," Pembroke said quietly. "He won't see the results of his work." "No," Wolfe agreed, "but his work will continue. The conservatory will endure. The orchids will bloom. That would have mattered to him." "Yes, it would have." Pembroke paused. "Mr. Wolfe, your fee, 1,000 plus expenses and 5,000 for recovering the orchids. That's 6,000 total, correct?" "Correct. I'm adding a bonus, $2,000 to establish the Malcolm Thorne Memorial Fund for Orchid Conservation. If you're willing to help administer it." Wolfe was silent for a moment. "Then, I accept. The fund will support legitimate orchid research and acquisition. No memorial to Malcolm Thorne could be more appropriate." After Pembroke hung up, I made out the bill and prepared the deposit. $8,000 for a week's work wasn't bad, even if half of it went to memorial funds. The expenses were minimal: Saul's fees, some phone calls, transportation costs. Wolfe would show a healthy profit. More importantly, his rothschildianum was home. The next days settled into routine. Nash was arraigned, denied bail, and remanded to custody pending trial. His attorney made noises about mental illness and obsessive disorders, but the evidence was overwhelming. The trial would be a formality. The orchid community buzzed with shock and gossip. Collectors who'd visited Nash's apartment felt violated. He'd studied their collections, identified targets, planned thefts while pretending friendship. The American Orchid Society issued new security recommendations. Conservatories and botanical gardens reviewed their access protocols. And in Wolfe's plant rooms, the Paphiopedilum rothschildianum continued its development toward bloom. Theodore monitored it hourly, taking notes, measuring growth, watching the flower buds swell and color. On a Friday evening, exactly 10 days after the recovery, the house phone buzzed during dinner. Wolfe picked it up. "Yes?" Theodore's voice excited. "Mr. Wolfe, the Rothschildianum is opening. The first flower. You should come now." Wolfe stood immediately. "Archie, come with me." We went up together, Fritz following with a camera. Wolfe wanted the moment documented. In the tropical room, evening light slanted through the glass walls, turning the greenhouse golden. The rothschildianum stood on its bench, and the flower spike bore 4 large blooms, the first fully open. The flower was extraordinary, perhaps 6 inches across, with long ribbon-like petals striped in burgundy and cream, a large pouch mottled in gold and green, and distinctive lateral petals that stood like wings. The color was deep and rich, the form perfect, the entire effect of breathtaking beauty. 8 years of cultivation had produced this moment. 15 years of breeding work before that. Patience, expertise, dedication, all distilled into one perfect flower. Wolfe stood before it for a long time, silent, absorbed. Fritz took photographs from various angles, capturing the flower in the golden light. Theodore made notes, his handwriting precise as always. Finally, Wolfe spoke. "Theodore, you've done exceptional work." "Thank you, sir. But the plant did the real work. We just provided the conditions." "Yes, that's all we can ever do." Wolfe touched the flower's pouch gently. "Provide the conditions and wait. Some things cannot be rushed." We stood there as the light faded and the greenhouse's grow lights began to glow. Warm and artificial but sufficient. The rothschildianum bloomed on, indifferent to the drama that had surrounded it, focused only on the ancient imperative to flower, to reproduce, to ensure its genetic legacy. Downstairs the dogs were settling for the night. Caesar by Wolfe's bedroom door, Mars patrolling the upper hall, Apollo watching the office corridor, Minerva stationed near the elevator, Diana covering the stairs, Loyal in his spot near the front entrance. The brownstone was secure, the orchid safe, order restored. In the office, I typed up the final case notes while Wolfe read, a beer at his elbow, satisfied with the world. Tomorrow the rothschildianum would still bloom. Next week, other buds would open. The flowers would last perhaps 6 weeks before fading. And then, in another 8 or 10 years, if the conditions were right and the cultivation proper, the plant would bloom again. That was the lesson of orchids, I supposed. That beauty requires time. That excellence cannot be stolen. That patience in the end produces results that shortcuts never achieve. Gregory Nash had tried to steal beauty, and had destroyed himself in the process. Malcolm Thorne had dedicated his life to nurturing it, and had left a legacy that would endure. Nero Wolfe had earned his collection through years of patient work, and now enjoyed the fruits of that labor. The orchid thief was caught. The case was closed. The flowers bloomed. Everything else was just details. 6 weeks later, I was at my desk sorting mail when a package arrived from the Botanical Conservatory. Inside was a framed photograph of Malcolm Thorne standing in a greenhouse, surrounded by orchids, smiling gently at the camera. A brass plaque on the frame read, "Malcolm Thorne, 1909 to 90." Attached was a note from Dr. Pembroke. "Mr. Wolfe, the Malcolm Thorne Memorial Fund is now established, with the $2,000 bonus you provided as seed money. The Conservatory's board has voted to match it with an additional $3,000, and we're accepting donations from the orchid community. Malcolm's legacy will support conservation work he would have championed. The Rothschildianum specimen Nash stole from us has bloomed. A magnificent display. We've named it Paphiopedilum Rothschildianum, Malcolm's pride in his honor. Seemed appropriate. Thank you for bringing his killer to justice. The orchid world is safer for it. Alistair Pembroke." I took the photograph up to the plant rooms, where Wolfe was inspecting his Cattleya collection. I showed him the package. He examined the photograph for a long moment. "Put it in the office," he said quietly, "next to the filing cabinets. Malcolm Thorne earned a place of honor. The photograph hangs there still, Malcolm's gentle smile watching over the office where his murder was solved. The Memorial Fund continues its work, supporting orchid conservation around the world. Gregory Nash serves a life sentence in Sing Sing, cultivating a small windowsill garden of common houseplants, no orchids allowed. And in Wolfe's greenhouse, the Paphiopedilum rothschildianum blooms every 8 to 10 years, each flowering as perfect as the first. Theodore tends it with meticulous care. Wolfe visits it daily during his plant room hours. The dogs patrol below, keeping the brownstone secure. Beauty persists, patience is rewarded, and somewhere in the cosmos, Malcolm Thorne rests easy, knowing the orchids he loved are protected by someone who understands their true value. Not as trophies to be stolen, but as living art to be earned.